Oh, do got another joyful story here this time, but on this one, it's just highlighting that this clown show that of cultural enrichment that we seem to be experiencing in the UK isn't just unique to here. And this time, I'm going to go over the channel again to France. So this one's from Remix News. Let us crack on. So, France, pro migrant activist raped by homeless migrant is shocked to see her rapist on the street. Well, that is quite a repeating story that I've heard before of activists getting assaulted, raped, murdered, etc., by the people that they're supposed to be helping and have got the bleeding heart syndrome for. Unfortunately, uh, ideology and reality come crashing into each other very quickly, and reality has a habit of being the dominant force there, which is very tragic for these people. It takes me back to thinking about when there was the two American cyclists who wanted to cycle around the world to prove how noble and wonderful everybody was around the planet, and I believe they did have a generally good time until they got to, I think it was Azerbaijan or somewhere like, or Turkmenistan or somewhere like that, and they got run over by an ISIS member who thought they were Americans, did a U-turn in the road and ran them both over with great haste. And then there's the multiple cases of various female backpackers going around places like Malta and Turkey and that, and then getting basically kidnapped by taxi drivers, and the bodies are found dismembered and horribly mutilated by the sides of the road. Unfortunately, there are many, many cases like that, and it's usually people who have these idealistic views on everybody in the world. And again, they go to these countries thinking that everybody wants to hold hand and sing Kumbaya, and then they realise what real patriarchy is very quickly, and sadly to their own demise. The victim, who was a vocal supporter of open borders, was allegedly raped by a migrant in 2021 and is now shocked to see him back on the street. Well, unfortunately, in this country, that is something that we've experienced for decades with victims of the grooming gangs, or as I like to call them, the rape gangs. Those victims often bump into their attackers who are supposed to have been deported. We see numerous cases of that in the papers and on the news. It's disgusting, but it's a case in the West where we're just absolutely besotted by weak and ineffectual elites, basically our cultural elites. So people like judges and the people who are running like the Home Office, civil servants, all those people, the elites of society. It's weak people in my opinion. A pro-migrant student activist, well, student, that goes without saying, doesn't it? They always are. Who was raped by a homeless migrant, says she's shocked to have encountered the man on the street before his trial began. The man's trial is set to start tomorrow, this being December the 14th, after police arrested him in 2021 for allegedly raping the 23-year-old Oceana Decan at knife point in Bordeaux parking lot, which means the trial is only beginning for a case that happened 2 years ago. I mean, that in itself is absolutely terrible. Raped at knife point, allegedly, got to say. And it's taken 2 years for this case to happen. The 58-year-old suspect, Eurobar, was released from pre-trial detention in September of this year, which allows him to roam the streets until his trial begins. The man is unemployed, homeless, and has a long criminal history for violence and sexual assault, according to French newspaper Sud Quest. So, I mean, if he's a repeat offender, I think it's a done deal that he has actually done this. I think it's fair enough to say that. Obviously, trial, I don't know what the result is. It's the 15th now when I'm reading this, so I don't know what the result of this trial has been. Barr was released by the trial judge despite the prosecutors recommending the migrant stay in detention until his. I mean, that is insane. The judge has released him. I mean, that is. This is the problem that I say, and I say it quite a lot. There's something called friend-enemy distinction. That judge clearly is an enemy of the people of France. Clearly, by that action alone, he's a fifth columnist and a traitor. That is dangerous. There's a little thing here saying France, elderly Algerian migrant sexually assaults pregnant woman, immediately released by authorities and told to leave France. And then says only 0.2% of Algerians slated for deportation are actually sent home. That's just madness, isn't it? 0.2% who are supposed to get deported are actually deported. Less than 1%. A fifth of 1%. That is just crazy. I mean, that's like here, we had the Home Office the other day in a briefing where they had 17,000. I think it was Algerians as well. Actually, I know it's Eastern Europe, somewhere like Balkans or Eastern Europe or somewhere like that. 17,000 of them that they didn't know where they were. They just sent them an email to have these online they're supposed to have these meetings, which is all done via like Zoom meeting. And 17,000 of them, I think it was, just didn't show up, and so they just wrote them off. Just put a line through the names. Can't find them. Oh well. It's insane, isn't it? It's absolutely maddening. And then they wonder why society's going bursting at the seams, like why people are becoming radicalised. And then they'll be surprised when we end up with a mid-century mustache man, and our own Austrian painter. They'll be like, "Oh my God, how has this happened? I can't understand it. How did the National Socialists get into power? It was because you let them by not doing your basic duty, which is to protect the country and look after it." Deacon is a pro-migrant activist. However, the case has taken somewhat of a twist, with French media outlet Infos Bordeaux writing that the case is getting special attention because the victim is a friend of the left and involved in pro-migrant activities. If feminist associations, usually very silent in the face of this type of rape, have decided to publicise the case, it's because Oceana Decan is one of them. Very committed to the left, she has fought for the cause of migrants since her young years. The high school student of Jean Brito, Ilette Villiers, sorry for the pronunciation, she was already mobilising her classmates to help migrants through food collections before joining Sissons Pro Bordeaux. She was, again, pronunciation, she was involved in numerous organisations helping foreigners, Amnesty International, Utopia 56, SOS Racism, etc. And then a little box again. In France, foreigners commit 69% of robberies, violent crimes, and sexual assaults on public transport. Africans are responsible for 52% of crime on public transport, while making up just 3.2% of the population. I mean, that is just. If you want to sort crime out right there, that is how you deal with it. It's a case of expel a whole group of people, and I know that might sound quite harsh or unacceptable to some people, to various people, but you've got to get to the point where you think, can our society function? Is our civilization actually going to survive this? And that's just, you've got to start thinking civilizationally. And this is the problem with, I suppose, rampant liberalism that we've got, and rampant individualism, is it's allowing this kind of madness to take hold. And again, I've said this in other videos. Because people are no longer going to church anymore, we've pretty much got, and you don't even have to believe in God to go to church. It's just being engaged and meeting your peers, meeting your community, meeting the people, and having to face them and exchanging ideas. We see this with, say, there was the teacher in Batley who, I think he showed a picture of Muhammad or something like that, and you ended up with mobs of Muslims turning up outside the school. Well, they're able to organise like that because they actually meet each other regularly in the mosques. So people in the West are wondering, how is this happening to us, and how are we so prone to allowing this to happen? We allow it to happen to ourselves because we've allowed ourselves to become disenfranchised from each other, and we're now just a group of individuals being easily picked off by the government. Love that, by the way. The government want us to be a load of individuals who are disconnected from each other because it means they can control us easier as a society. And I'm not saying that we should be feral and wild, but the government shouldn't tyrannise the population like they're doing at the moment with immigration, and by allowing these people to behave like this. And we're basically forced to accept it because we're incapable of organising, because we've allowed ourselves to become disorganised and fractured and just sit in our homes watching telly, being scared. It's shocking. Deacon has been very vocal about her own personal case, even if her own advocacy for open borders, along with the NGOs she is affiliated with, has led to increased sexual harassment of women and exploitation and an explosion in rape across France. She describes how she first saw Bar by chance as she was out walking despite the man being arrested for raping her. She wasn't warned. One day in October, well, what do you expect? You know, she's been campaigning for all these rights for these people. What did you think was going to happen? Did you think that because it happened to you, that this man wouldn't be treated in the way that you've tried to get all these other illegal immigrants treated, and that you campaigned for getting more humane treatment because they're people too, even though the horrible rapists and murderers, got to treat them with dignity and allow them their rights? What about their human rights? Well, this is to be expected. This is the natural conclusion of what you've worked for. I'm afraid, you know, live by the sword, die by the sword. I guess, and I do feel bad for her. You know, that this has happened. You know, that's going to traumatize her for a long time. However, you reap what you sow, I guess, don't you? Um, he was playing guitar and panhandling. It was a shock. It reawakened everything. Now I have panic attacks. I don't dare leave my house. As soon as I have to go into town, I have to be accompanied. Yeah, I'm not surprised you do. And she's going to be terrified. She may be like that for the rest of her life, and that's tragic for her. And unfortunately, it's taken this actually happening to her for her to start realizing the consequences of her actions, which is the shame of it. You know, unfortunately, some people, you can tell them that they're going to get burned, but they won't listen until they touch it. You know, it's like telling someone it's wet paint. They don't touch it, it's wet paint. What do? Finger. Is it wet? It's just tragic. It absolutely is. As soon as I have to go into town, I have to be accompanied, said Deacon. French media reports that she is on sick leave and suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. Yep, absolutely not surprised by that, according to her psychologist. Women's rights groups are calling for a rally against the man's early release. Well, it's a shame they're only doing it for that one man, isn't it? It's the same with the grooming gangs with hashtag #MeToo. None of those women, those privileged women, cared about those white working class girls when they were getting raped and murdered and drugged and pimped and trafficked and beaten and branded, etc., etc., etc. But when it came to wealthy women and successful women getting hard done by, hashtag #MeToo, we've got to end this. This is the hypocrisy of these people. They only care when it's on their doorstep. That's all they care about. It's disgusting. Um, when he appears in his trial scheduled for tomorrow, so obviously this is from the 13th, so this is 2 days ago, he faces up to 20 years in prison for the alleged rape at knife. Well, he should get the death penalty, really. They should get the guillotine out for him, in my opinion. Definitely a flogging. I know I always say that, but definitely flogging as well. Once again, the justice system is failing to protect victims of sexist and sexual violence. A number of feminist groups wrote in a press release, also calling for a rally in front of the court. Well, this is what happens when you import the third world. You get the third world, I'm afraid. You know, when you bring somebody over from a country like, I don't know, I'll pick one out around Somalia. If you bring somebody over from Somalia, they're not going to magically become westernized when they get off the plane. They are a product of their environment where they grew up. You know, and if you bring 10 people over, they're still going to be Somali. And if you bring 40 million Somalis over, you've basically just transposed Somalia to a new country, you know, from one place to another. That's all you're doing. You know, what's so hard for people to understand about this, that when you move the third, what makes Europe and successful is the people of Europe, the work ethic, the culture, you know, the way people here live. That's what makes Europe. It's the same with Africa. The reason why Africa is so dysfunctional is because it's full of African people who are dysfunctional people. Not that every single African is dysfunctional. You know, I've met plenty of very functional Africans, and they've said the exact same thing, and they lament the problems of Africa, and that the people of Africa don't want to change because of how tribal it is. And you know, it's just, you can't change that. Civilization is the people that live there. Deacon says the man managed to lure her into an underground parking garage in 2021 where he sprung a trap. Now, again, I don't want to victim blame her here, but what's happened here? How is she so naive as to walk into an underground parking lot with a strange man like that? You know, I've got 3 daughters myself, and I'm going to be teaching them. You do not go places with strange men. You know, and I know 99% of the time, even more than that, you know, men aren't dangerous. But is it worth the risk? The risk versus reward of the consequences, when that's the consequence? Absolutely not. And especially when women are getting drunk and taken advantage of by predatory men. It's like, well, you're not asking for it, obviously, right? However, you're making yourself a more obvious target to those predatory men by doing that. You know, this is basic stuff that was common knowledge to our ancestors, not even 100 years ago. Like, you know, it was normal for women to get chaperoned because the fathers and the older brothers and the male cousins and uncles were fully aware of what other men are like, just like men are now. It's not patriarchy for males to want to chaperone and look after females of the family. You know, this is what's ended up happening when feminism has destroyed these societal norms that we've had. Women have become easy prey for these nonces and predators, especially from these third world countries where they don't respect women or women's rights. Especially foreign women, women who are foreign to them and not part of their religious and or tribal group. You know, they actually have a pecking order of how they see people. You know, and it generally goes, are you in my family name? Yes, no. Are you in my tribe? Yes, no. Are you in my religious group? Yeah, well, nationality? Yes, no. Are you in my religious group? Yes, no. And that's how they move through it all. And if you and the less yeses you have, the less they think of you as a person, and you start becoming almost subhuman to them. And that's unfortunately just the way it is in a lot of these countries. Suddenly, his tone changes, and he pulls out a knife about 15 centimeters long, so about 7 inches. He says he's going to kill me. I'm stunned. I can see myself dying. He's forcing me to be raped. Well, that is rape, being forced, yes. He said a witness nearby intervened to stop the rape midway. Foreigners are responsible for 69% of rapes, sexual assaults, and sexual harassment on French public transport. As French President Emmanuel Macron has admitted himself, well, he's the absolute importer in chief, him really, with France, isn't he? You know, he loves it. You know, the amount of pictures that he's had taken with topless male migrants. I wonder if he invites them round to his house to go through his grandma wife. Half of all crimes committed in Paris are committed by foreigners, but researchers say this figure is actually as high as 2/3. I mean, that's just insane, isn't it? That is actually just that. Is, how can any politician or judge or anybody in that country with any influence allow this to continue happening? And instead, they let these charities browbeat them into submission using emotional tactics. And this is what I've said in other videos. We've got to stop arguing on emotional terms because the left will just defeat us every single day of the week on that. Every day of the week, that is their home turf. And as any good general will tell you, you pick the field of battle. And we, as people who care about Western civilization, have got to stop being emotional and start being logical and standing up and saying, no, this goes on no more. I don't care about the emotional arguments that you're making. I care about civilization continuing in the West. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there because I'm starting to ramble and rant. If you've appreciated that article that I've gone through, please like, subscribe, and give us a comment below. And I shall hopefully post another video later. Take care. Bye-bye.